He woke up before the alarm, the way he always did. The room was still dark, and the air felt heavy with tiredness. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet breathing of his child from the next room. That sound was the reason he got up every day, even when his body begged him to stay in bed. He rubbed his face, sat up slowly, and let out a long breath. Another day was starting. The kitchen light flickered on. He made a simple breakfast, careful not to make noise. His phone lay on the counter, screen down. He didn't check it yet. Mornings were already stressful enough. He packed a small lunch, the same way he had learned to do over the years. Nothing fancy, just enough. Life had taught him how to survive on just enough. When his child woke up, he smiled, even though his eyes still burned from lack of sleep. He helped with shoes, fixed messy hair, and listened to stories that jumped from one idea to another. He nodded and laughed at the right moments. No matter how tired he was, he never rushed this part. These few minutes mattered more than anything else. After the drop-off, he stood for a second outside the building, staring at the door. He checked his phone then. No new messages. He slipped it back into his pocket and headed for work. The office building was tall and cold, made of glass and steel. It always made him feel small. As he walked in, people passed him without looking. Some nodded. Most didn't. He was used to that. He wasn't the loud type. He did his work, met his deadlines, and stayed out of trouble. That was his goal every single day. His desk sat near the edge of the open floor. From there, he could see almost everything. The rows of desks, the meeting rooms, and the office at the far end, where the CEO spent most of her time. Her door was often open, not because she welcomed people, but because she liked to see everything. She had a sharp way about her. Her voice was calm, but it could cut deep. People straightened their backs when she walked by. Conversation stopped. Even the air felt different. Everyone knew she watched closely. Some said she respected hard work. Others said she enjoyed control. He didn't know which was true. He only knew he stayed careful when she was around. He logged in and started his tasks. Numbers, reports, emails. His fingers moved fast, almost without thought. This job paid the bills. It paid for school supplies, food, rent, and small treats when he could afford them. Losing it was not an option. Around him, co-workers whispered about deadlines and meetings. Some complained quietly. Some joked to hide their stress. He stayed focused. He had learned that being invisible was sometimes safer than being noticed. Still, he could feel her eyes sometimes. Not always directly, but like a weight on his back. Once, when he stood to stretch, she glanced over. He quickly sat down. Another time, when he sighed after reading a long email, she raised an eyebrow. His chest tightened. He reminded himself to breathe. It wasn't that he did bad work. In fact, his results were often better than most. But he was human. Some days he looked tired. Some days his focus slipped for a second. He carried a whole life on his shoulders, and it showed, even when he tried to hide it. Late in the morning, his phone vibrated softly in his pocket. He felt it right away. His heart skipped. The school rarely called unless something was wrong. He didn't take the phone out. Not yet. He waited, staring at his screen, trying to finish the line he was working on. The vibration came again. He swallowed. His hands felt cold. He glanced around. No one seemed to notice. Slowly, carefully, he shifted his leg and checked the phone under the desk. Just a quick look. 1 second. At that exact moment, a shadow fell across his desk. He froze. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. He could feel her presence. The room seemed to go quiet, even though people were still typing and talking. She leaned closer, just enough for him to hear her, but not loud enough for others. Her voice was low, almost calm. "Peek one more time," she whispered, "and you're fired." The words hit him harder than he expected. His chest tightened, and his throat went dry. He slowly locked his phone and slid it back into his pocket. He nodded once, without looking at her. She straightened up and walked away, heels clicking against the floor. Around him, people kept working. No one said anything. No one met his eyes. He stared at his screen, but the numbers blurred. His ears rang. Fired. Just like that. Over glance. Over 1 second. He thought about his child, about the bills waiting at home, about the careful balance he worked so hard to keep. His hands trembled slightly, and he pressed them flat on the desk. He wanted to explain. He wanted to say it was important. He wanted to say he wasn't careless, just worried. But he didn't. He had learned that explanations were often seen as excuses. The phone stayed silent after that. Each minute felt heavy. He worked, but his mind was somewhere else. A part of him felt small and ashamed. Another part felt something new rising inside him, something tight and uncomfortable. He had swallowed many things in his life. Pain, loss, fear. He had stayed quiet for the sake of survival. But as he sat there, staring at his screen, he wondered how long a person could stay silent before something broke. When the clock finally moved forward, he exhaled slowly. This was only the beginning of the day. And somehow, he knew this day would not end the way all the others had. The rest of the morning moved slowly, like time itself was tired. He kept working, line after line, task after task, but his mind refused to stay still. Every few minutes, the warning replayed in his head. Her voice, the words, the way she said them so softly, like it was nothing. Peek one more time, you're fired. He had heard people get fired before. Loud arguments, closed-door meetings, sudden goodbyes. But this was different. This was quiet, personal. It felt like a threat wrapped in a whisper. He sat straighter in his chair, afraid even to stretch. His phone felt heavier in his pocket now, like it could explode at any moment. He didn't dare touch it. If something was wrong at school, he wouldn't know. The thought made his stomach twist, but fear kept his hands still. Around noon, people began standing up, heading toward the break area. Some chatted. Some laughed. Normal sound of a normal workday. He stayed seated, pretending to finish something important. He didn't feel hungry anyway. A coworker passed by and paused for a second. Their eyes met just briefly. There was something there, pity maybe, or fear. Then the coworker looked away and kept walking. That hurt more than if they had said something. He finally stood up when the office thinned out. His legs felt stiff. He walked slowly to a window and stared outside. Cars moved below. People rushing from one place to another. Everyone had somewhere to be. Someone waiting. Someone depending on them. He pulled his phone out then, hand shaking slightly. No missed calls. No new messages. Relief washed over him, followed by guilt. He felt weak for feeling relieved. What kind of parent was glad nothing had happened? Instead of being ready for anything, he slipped the phone away again and went back to his desk before anyone returned. When the CEO walked out of her office later that afternoon, the air shifted again. She didn't look at him this time. That somehow felt worse, like he wasn't worth the effort anymore. She stopped near another desk and spoke sharply about a report. The employee nodded fast, apologizing. He watched it all without meaning to. He saw how people shrank around her, how no one pushed back. He wondered if this was just how things were meant to be. He remembered his first day at this job, how hopeful he had been, how proud. He had promised himself that if he worked hard enough, kept his head down, life would get easier. But years passed, and easy never came. By the end of the day, his shoulders ached, not from work, but from holding everything inside. When the clock finally signaled it was time to leave, he shut down his computer carefully, like any sudden move might draw attention. As he stood up, her door opened again. "Come here," she said. Not loud, not angry, just firm. His heart dropped. This was it. He walked toward her office, each step heavy. People nearby went quiet, pretending to focus on their screens. Inside, her office was neat and cold. No personal photos. No warmth. She sat behind her desk, hands folded. "You need to understand something," she said. "This place runs on focus. Distractions cost money." He nodded. He didn't trust his voice. "I don't care what's happening outside these walls," she continued. "When you're here, you're here. Do you understand?" "Yes," he said quietly. She studied him for a moment, like she was deciding how much he was worth. "Good," she said. "You can go." That was it. No chance to speak. No space to explain. He walked out, face burning, and gathered his things. The workday ended like it always did, but he felt different, smaller, and somehow heavier. On the way to pick up his child, he replayed the conversation again and again. He told himself he should have said something, anything, but fear had locked his words away. When he reached the school, his child ran toward him with a big smile. That smile broke something open inside him. He crouched down and hugged tight, holding on longer than usual. At home, they ate dinner together. Simple food. Quiet moments. His child talked about the day, about small things that felt big in their world. He listened, nodding, smiling, but his mind drifted. That night, after putting his child to bed, he sat alone at the table. The house was silent. He finally allowed himself to feel everything he had pushed down all day. The fear, the anger, the shame. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He was a parent trying to survive. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if staying silent was really protecting him or slowly breaking him. He didn't know it yet, but something inside him had shifted. The warning at work had planted a seed, and once planted, it refused to stay buried. Tomorrow would test him in ways he wasn't ready for. And this time, staying quiet might not be enough. The next morning felt different. He woke up at the same time, before the alarm, but something inside him felt heavier than usual. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Quiet House. For a few seconds, he thought about calling in sick. Just one day to breathe, one day without pressure. But bills did not pause. Rent did not wait. So he got up. He moved through his routine like always, making breakfast, packing lunch, tying small shoes, giving reminders about homework. He smiled when he needed to smile. He listened when he needed to listen. But behind his eyes, his thoughts were louder than ever. At the school gate, his child hugged him tight. "Will you check your phone today if I need you?" The question was innocent, simple, but it hit him hard. He forced a soft smile. "I always check when it's important." He hoped that was true. On the drive to work, he kept thinking about the whisper, the warning, the look in her eyes. It wasn't just about the phone. It was about control, about reminding him that he could be replaced. When he entered the office, the usual cold feeling wrapped around him again. He sat down, logged in, and began working. Today, he decided he would not touch his phone at all. Not even once. Hours passed. He worked faster than usual, almost trying to prove something. Emails were answered quickly. Reports were submitted early. He double-checked everything. Still, he felt watched. Around mid-morning, the CEO stepped out of her office. She walked slowly between desks, scanning screens. When she reached his row, she stopped behind him. He felt her there before he saw her reflection on his monitor. "Good," she said quietly. "This is a focus I expect." It wasn't praise. It felt more like approval given to someone on probation. He nodded once, but something inside him stirred. A quiet question. Why did he need approval for doing his job? Why did one glance at his phone define his value? Just before lunch, his computer screen froze. He frowned and tried restarting the program. Nothing happened. He raised his hand slightly to get help from IT. The CEO noticed first. "What's the problem now?" she asked from across the room. "My system froze," he replied calmly. She walked closer, heels clicking again. "Excuses waste time," she said. "It's not an excuse," he answered, still calm. "It's a technical issue." There was a brief silence. It was the first time he had responded without lowering his voice. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not angry, just surprised. "Then fix it quickly," she said. He nodded and turned back to his screen. His heart was beating fast, but he felt something else too. Not fear. Not exactly. Later that afternoon, the phone in his pocket vibrated again. This time, he didn't move. It vibrated a second time. He kept typing. The vibration stopped. His chest tightened. His mind raced. What if it was important? What if something had happened? He stared at the screen, but he couldn't read a single word. He realized something in that moment. He was being forced to choose between being a good employee and being a good parent. And that choice felt wrong. The vibration came again. Without thinking further, he slowly reached into his pocket. He didn't hide it under the desk this time. He simply took it out and looked at the screen. It was the school. His heart dropped. Before he could stand, a shadow fell over him again. She was there. "I thought I was clear," she said softly. He stood up this time. Slowly. Calmly. "It's my child's school," he said. "Step into my office," she replied. The room went silent again as he followed her. But this time, the silence felt different. People were watching more openly. Inside the office, she closed the door. "You were warned," she said. "I don't repeat myself." He looked at her directly for the first time since he started working there. "I understand," he said, "but this is my child's school calling. You are on company time." "And I am also a parent," he replied. The words hung in the air. She crossed her arms. If everyone decided their personal life was more important than their work, this company would collapse. He took a slow breath. "My personal life is not a hobby," he said quietly. "It's responsibility." She stared at him, waiting for him to back down. But he didn't. For years, he had swallowed his explanations. Today, something felt different. Not aggressive, not disrespectful, just honest. "I have never missed a deadline," he continued. "I stay late when needed. I cover shifts when others can't. I don't complain." She didn't interrupt. "But when the school calls," he added, "I need to know why." There was no anger in his voice, just truth. She leaned back in her chair. "You're making this emotional," she said. "No," he answered softly. "I'm making it real." Silence filled the room again. For a second, he thought she would fire him. He was ready for it now. Afraid, yes, but ready. Instead, she said, "Take the call, make it quick." He nodded and stepped outside the office to answer. It turned out to be a small issue. His child had forgotten a permission slip and was worried. Nothing serious, just a small voice needing reassurance. He spoke gently, promised to fix it, and hung up. When he returned to his desk, he felt something had shifted, not in her, in him. For the first time, he had spoken without fear controlling every word. He realized something important. He was not asking for special treatment. He was asking to be treated like a human being. The rest of the day passed quietly. She did not call him into her office again. She did not praise him either. But she did not whisper another threat. As he packed his things to leave, he noticed a few coworkers glance at him differently. Not with pity this time, with something closer to respect. On his way home, he felt lighter than he had in months. Standing up had not destroyed him. It had steadied him. That night, after dinner, he helped with homework and listened to stories again. But this time, his mind wasn't trapped in fear. He felt present. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe consequences, maybe tension. But he knew one thing. He could not go back to shrinking himself to fit someone else's idea of control. The whisper that once made him feel small had now done something unexpected. It had reminded him who he was. The office felt tense the next morning, even before anything happened. He could sense at the moment he walked in. Conversations stopped a little too quickly. A few people looked at him, then looked away. News traveled fast in quiet offices. Even whispers had a way of spreading. He sat down at his desk and powered on his computer. He felt steady but alert, like someone walking across thin ice, aware that one wrong step could crack everything. He did not regret answering the call. That part was clear in his mind. But he knew actions had consequences, especially in this building. An hour into morning, an email popped up on everyone's screen. Mandatory team meeting. 11 a.m. conference room. No subject line. No explanation. His stomach tightened. Meetings like this rarely meant anything good. At 11 sharp, the team gathered. The conference room was bright, but uncomfortable. The long table felt more like a stage than a workspace. He chose a seat halfway down, neither hiding nor standing out. The CEO entered last. She closed the door behind her and stood at the head of the table. "I want to talk about standards," she began. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost too calm. "This company succeeds because we maintain focus, discipline, commitment." No one moved. No one spoke. "Recently," she continued, "I've noticed distractions creeping into our work environment." His chest felt tight, but he kept his face neutral. "When personal matters interfere with performance," she said, It affects everyone. A few people shifted in their chairs. He could feel the direction of the room turning toward him without anyone actually looking. She finally glanced his way. If someone cannot separate personal life from professional responsibility, she added, they may need to reconsider their priorities. The words were not loud. They were not shouted, but they were aimed. He felt heat rise in his face. For a brief moment, the old instinct returned. Stay quiet, let it pass, survive. But something inside him refused. He slowly raised his hand. The room went still. She looked surprised, but nodded once. Yes. He spoke clearly, not fast, not slow. I agree that focus is important, he said. I also believe responsibility is important. A few heads turned toward him. When the school calls a parent during work hours, he continued, that parent is not being distracted. They are responding to responsibility. The silence deepened. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't angry. His tone stayed even. I have never missed a deadline, he said. I've worked late. I've covered extra tasks. I respect this job. His hands were steady now. But I cannot ignore my child when the school calls. That is not a lack of discipline. That is being a parent. No one interrupted him. The CEO watched him closely. Her expression was unreadable. You're making this about yourself, she said. No, he replied gently. I think this is about more than me. That caught attention. He glanced briefly around the table. There are others here with families, he said, with responsibilities outside these walls. We work hard. We give our time and energy, but we are still human. The room felt different now, not frozen. Listening, I'm not asking for special treatment, he added. Just understanding. For the first time since he had known her, she did not respond immediately. The quiet stretched. Finally, she said, this is a workplace, not a home. He nodded. I know, but it is also a place filled with people who have homes. A soft sound came from someone at the far end of the table. Not laughter, more like agreement quickly hidden. The CEO's posture stiffened. If everyone begins answering personal calls whenever they please, she said, productivity will suffer. I answer one call, he replied, after being warned not to, and I accept that. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But I would rather risk this job than teach my child that work always comes before them. The sentence hung in the air. It was honest, simple, unpolished, and powerful. No one looked at their phones. No one shifted in their seats now. The CEO studied him in silence. The authority she usually carried so easily seemed slightly unsettled. You're saying the company is wrong? She asked. I'm saying balance matters, he answered. He wasn't shaking anymore. Years of staying quiet had built pressure inside him, but he was not exploding. He was releasing it calmly, word by word. I give my best here, he said, but I cannot pretend my life outside does not exist. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Not anger. Not exactly. Something closer to thought. The room felt less like a courtroom now, and more like conversation. She looked around at the team. Does anyone else feel this way? She asked. Silence. Then, slowly, one person raised their hand. Another followed. No one spoke loudly. No one made a speech. But the message was clear. This was not just a struggle. The CEO straightened. I expect professionalism, she said firmly. But perhaps we need clearer guidelines. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a threat either. The meeting ended without further confrontation. People stood up quietly, but the atmosphere had changed. As he walked back to his desk, two co-workers passed him. Thank you, one whispered softly. He nodded, surprised. He hadn't planned to speak. He hadn't planned to stand up in a room like that, but the moment had demanded honesty. Later that afternoon, an email arrived from management. A new policy would allow brief emergency calls from immediate family, as long as work responsibilities were met. The message was formal and simple. No one mentioned his name. No one needed to. He leaned back in his chair, reading it twice. It wasn't a big victory. It didn't change everything overnight. The workload remained heavy. The pressure remained real. But something important had shifted. Respect had entered the room. When he packed his bag at the end of the day, he didn't feel small anymore. He felt steady. As he walked past the CEO's office, she looked up briefly. Their eyes met for a second. There was no whisper this time. No threat. Just a quiet, thoughtful look. He nodded once and continued walking. Outside, the air felt lighter than usual. He realized something on the drive home. Standing up had not made him reckless. It had made him clear. Clear about his values. Clear about his priorities. Clear about the kind of example he wanted to set. When he reached the school, his child ran toward him again, smiling like always. He bent down and hugged tight. "How was work?" the small voice asked. He smiled gently. "It was important," he said, and for the first time in a long while, he truly meant it. The week after the meeting felt unfamiliar, almost strange. Nothing dramatic happened. No loud arguments. No sudden changes. But the energy in the office had shifted in a quiet way. It was as if everyone had taken a deeper breath. He returned to work on Monday expecting tension. Instead, he noticed small differences. People greeted each other a little more openly. Conversations felt less forced. Even the silence didn't seem as heavy. He sat at his desk and began working like always. Reports, emails, calls. The routine hadn't changed. The workload hadn't become lighter, but something inside him had. He no longer felt like he had to shrink himself. Late that morning, his phone buzzed once. A message from the school about an upcoming event. He glanced at it briefly, then placed it face down beside his keyboard. He finished his task first. Then, during a short break, he replied. No shadow appeared behind him. No whisper followed. Across the room, the CEO stepped out of her office. She walked past his desk without stopping. For a second, he wondered if she would say something. She didn't, but she didn't glare either. She simply continued walking. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't warmth, but it was respect. By midweek, the new family call policy had become normal. A few people stepped away briefly when needed. They returned and continued their work. Productivity did not collapse. The company did not fall apart. Life simply adjusted. One afternoon, he was called into the CEO's office again. This time, his heart did not drop. He knocked lightly and stepped inside. She gestured for him to sit. For a moment, she said nothing. She looked at a file on her desk, then closed it. "I reviewed your performance reports," she said. He waited quietly. "You've been consistent," she continued. "Reliable, strong results." He nodded once. "Thank you." She leaned back slightly. "I built this company from the ground up," she said. "I sacrificed a lot. Long hours, missed events, relationships." Her tone was different now. Not sharp, not cold. "I believe that was the only way to succeed." He listened carefully. This was the first time she had spoken about herself in that way. "When you spoke in that meeting," she added, "it challenged that belief." He didn't interrupt. "I don't like being challenged," she admitted, "but sometimes it's necessary." There was no full apology. She wasn't that kind of person. But there was acknowledgement. "I expect high standards," she said, "but I also expect honesty. You gave that." "Thank you," he replied quietly. She folded her hands on the desk. "I won't promise this will become a soft workplace," she said. "It won't. But I will say this. Results matter more than rigid control." He understood what she was offering. It wasn't kindness. It was adjustment. "That's fair," he said. She nodded once. "You can go." As he walked out of the office, he felt something settle inside him. He hadn't won a battle. He had shifted a perspective. Over the next few weeks, work continued steadily. Deadlines were met. Projects moved forward. The team seemed more connected. People helped each other more openly. There was less fear in small mistakes. One evening, as he packed up to leave, a co-worker approached him. "I've been afraid to ask for flexibility for months," the co-worker admitted quietly. "After that meeting, I finally did, and it worked." He smiled softly. Sometimes change didn't come through loud fights. Sometimes it came through calm truth. At home, life felt more peaceful too. He was less tense at the dinner table, less distracted during homework time. He laughed more easily. One night, while helping with a school project. His child looked up and asked, "Are you happy at work now?" He paused. It was a simple question. "I'm respected," he answered. That felt honest. Happiness was complicated. Work would always be work. Pressure would always exist. But respect made a difference. Months passed. He continued performing well. In fact, his focus improved. Without the constant fear of being watched for mistakes, he worked with more clarity. He even offered suggestions during meetings, small ideas to improve workflow. To his surprise, they were considered seriously. One afternoon, the CEO addressed the team again. "This quarter's results exceeded expectations," she said. Efficiency improved. Turnover decreased. Her eyes briefly scanned the room. "Adaptation is part of leadership," she added. The sentence was simple but meaningful. After the meeting, as people returned to their desks, he felt a quiet sense of pride. Not pride in winning. Pride in staying true to himself. He remembered the day of the whisper. How small he had felt. How close he had been to shrinking back into silence. If he had stayed quiet, nothing would have changed. But speaking up had not required anger. It had required courage. One evening, long after that first warning, he stayed a little late to finish a project. The office was mostly empty. As he shut down his computer, he noticed the CEO still in her office. She stepped out as he picked up his bag. "Heading home?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. She hesitated briefly. "Don't miss dinner," she said. It was a small comment, but it meant something. He nodded. "I won't." Outside, the sky was turning orange with sunset. He breathed in deeply, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. When he arrived at the school for pickup, his child ran toward him like always. He lifted the small backpack from tired shoulders and listened to stories about the day, a drawing that received praise, a new friend, a funny moment during class. As they walked home together, hand in hand, he realized something important. Standing up at work had not only changed his office, it had changed him. He no longer saw himself as someone lucky to keep a job. He saw himself as someone valuable, a worker who delivered results, a parent who showed up, a person who deserved dignity. Later that night, after lights were off and the house grew quiet, he sat alone for a moment in the living room. He thought about how close he had come to losing his voice, all because of a whisper. But whispers only have power when we accept them as truth. He had chosen not to. The next day would bring new challenges. Work would still be demanding. Life would still be busy. But now, when his phone buzzed, he no longer felt fear. He felt balance. And that balance, between responsibility and humanity, was worth more than any warning could take away.